Hello there, Lynx here, and welcome to Pale Cachexia. Another day. And... wait, what happened to all the crops? Did we collect everything? Quite literally? Or maybe it's not another day, but we are further in the future. Let's find out. How are there so many of these accursed things? I should be saying, how there are so many of these accursed things. Wiping the sweat from his brow with a forearm, the man sighed heavily. Could it be that after each day there will be like a scene from the past? He was only halfway through planting his potatoes, one of the staple crops he'd plant. They were taking much longer than expected, and was far from an enjoyable process.
With all the work I've put in this patch, I expect something fine produce to come out of it,
he announced sharply to the freshly tilled earth around him, which currently only offered a few sparse seedlings. It also depends on the ground itself, right? Sorry. Still, despite all his annoyance and grumbling, Isaac couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt from surveying his work. Between the garden and the newly renovated Manor, his old family grounds were becoming a beautiful, independent refugee in the forest. I should be saying refuge, by the way. At last, he would be free from the wheels of others, free from all the rules, structures, and arbitrary games of society. It was well worth the price of being completely alone. It sucks for. Especially in his case, given that he was... I assume he was in love with that woman, right? Well, not entirely alone. Isaiah's gaze flicked towards the small figure sitting in the grass nearby, tomed with flowers and giggling with wonder at the sky. The scene was one he'd longed for so many times. Only his dreams. She was here too, laughing and holding their child, the sunlight glittering on their matching hair. Without her, it seemed like nothing more than a sad joke. Dude, I mean, at least you have the daughter with you, man. The caricature of a clueless father played for a fool by his beloved.
And what a fool I am.
Didn't I make this voice more or less for narration?
What a fool I am.
Whatever. He muttered bitterly to himself, tossing his shovel aside and rubbing a hand across his brow.
Stuck with a child I have no clue how to care for? Oh, they're gardening and laboring when I'm nothing but a witless academic who inadvertently slew all of his houseplants by forgetting to water them. I've got myself in quite the mess this time, haven't I?
His chest heaved with a long, tired sigh. As much as he tried to convince himself this was the right choice, that he would be happier out here than in the city, a sense of doubt always came creeping back to him. I would be happier in a place like this than in the city, that's for sure. As long as there is connection with the internet. And like it had for so many years. The Pale's icy grip still held him in the clutches. Earlier in the year, when he was cleaning and refurbishing the Manor for his new family, Isaac had barely felt the symptoms. A wealth of energy flowed through him, and all of his lethargy was washed away by tides of excitement. But now, He couldn't rouse himself from bed half the time, and the disease attacked him savagely when he least expected it. His last true hope for living, the only thing giving him the will to fight the Pale's onslaught, was his search for a cure. For he could feel that hope beginning to wane too. Papa! The man jerked his head towards the source of the tiny voice. He kept forgetting she was even there, playing among the flowers. But when he looked down at the child, he saw her tiny hand outstretched towards him. A little white blossom lay in the corner of her palm, offered up to him alongside a sunny, guileless smile. Reluctantly, the man lowered down to one knee. With hesitant, uncertain fingers, he reached out to take her offering, holding it in his much larger palm. Papa! Papa! I feel so weird saying that. The girl delightedly clapped her hands, breaking into a happy fit of giggles. Isaac watched her for several long moments, his face contorting slightly, as if it wasn't fully sure what expression to make.
What a silly girl. Like a tame bubbling brook, you are. Silence is a virtue, especially for children.
Grumbling quietly, he shoved the white flower into his pocket, then reached out to pick up his shovel once more. There was still a great deal of planting to be done. He had to take advantage of days like today, when he had the strength to work properly. No time to be playing around with flowers, certainly. Anyone curious as well what happened with him exactly? I mean, Seina told us that he was not buried in that cemetery, so... What's up with that? With that, he set about digging again, driving his shovel into the soft earth with vehement strikes. What a strange life he had created for himself. Strange, solitary, and most likely, a very difficult one, indeed. There was much he had to learn, and not simply for academic curiosity, but for their survival. It was a heavy pressure, unforgiving and merciless as nature itself. Nor was he young man fit, full of vigorous energy any longer, able to finish 100 tasks in one day. But somehow, he couldn't imagine going back to how life was before. Even if he never became a skilled farmer, or a decent carpenter, or an adept tailor. At least, he was forging his path with his own two hands. As long as he retained that endless freedom, cherished it, grew bolder in it, and one day perhaps even passed it down to her. He could surely carry any wave on his shoulders, along the way. Hopefully, is what I would like to say.
Thunder.
Oh boy, here we go. A distant rumble stirred Esther from her sleep. Ah! I clicked. Shit. Her hazy, half-open eyes drifted towards the window where a blue sky greeted her with little morning light. Dark, heavy drops sluggishly coursed down the glass, forming jagged patterns that soon dissolved into nothingness. Damn, she's adorable. She's beautiful. It's crazy. The grayness brought back her memories of the city. Dim, cold dawns filtering through her bedroom window, minutes spent staring out past the smoking chimneys into the industrial fog that always clouded her view. Mornings where it felt like any man struggled to will herself upward to muster the strength for starting a new day. She could hear her parents down below, their muffled voices greeting each other cheerfully over tea and breakfast. Wait, is this a memory as well? But as much as she dearly wanted to join them, the longer she lay there, listening to their little light chatter, the more she felt removed from them altogether. A sense of loneliness so deep that it grew complacent, resigned to the fact that she would never again rejoin the unafflicted world. And the more she dwelt on that sullen thought, the less Esther felt like she wanted to rejoin such a world at all. Until finally, a restless sleep slowly would come to cover her in darkness, once more.
Esther, are you awake?
Her eyelids fluttered open again. When she jerked her head upward, she saw Seina standing beside the sofa, looking down at her rather timidly.
Oh, I'm so sorry if I woke you up. I just thought I'd make some tea, so I was checking if I should put on a bigger pot for the two of us.
Despite her light smile, something in Seina's tone seemed to carry a hint of worry. Almost automatically, Esther slowly pushed herself into a sitting position. She barely realized it until her bare feet brushed the floor, sending a faint shiver up her spine.
It's fine. I was already awake. You liar, you. Thank you for checking on me. Oh, of course.
Seina looked relieved, nodding contently to Esther's words.
Tea for two then. I'll go put on the kettle. Oh, and I thought we could stay inside today. I normally do that on rainy days. We could go over Papa's books and research together, maybe, if I wouldn't bother you. I'd be grateful for your help, Seina. There are so many books and papers. I barely know where to start. Yes, of course! I'd be happy to help. Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, but first things first, the tea. I'll go fix a pot that's perfect for a day like this. If you don't mind, could you start the fire and light a few candles, Esther? There is a tinder box in the desk by the window.
With that, she turned to hurry off into the kitchen, the soft pattering of her footsteps buried beneath the drone of the heavy rain. Again, in an unconscious movement, Esther found herself rising from her nest of blankets with little effort. It caught her off guard. Normally, her nest left her all but catatonic on overcast days. Perhaps her self-consciousness around Seina was an even stronger force than her deep lethargy. Either way, it seemed best not to question it. I guess? After changing into her day clothes and fishing out the tinderbox Seina mentioned, Esther knelt down to kindle the fireplace. As soon as it flickered to life, filling the room with a warm light and steady crackling, she felt like a spark of energy lit inside of her too. So strange, how only a small fire could make such a difference. When Seina returned, she proudly held a fine silver tray in her hands. Along with the tea, she brought 2 bowls of the granola she'd freshly made, a deliciously comforting breakfast alongside their warm drinks. They sat down on the sofa to munch together, watching the rain pouring down in sheets past the window pane. It was one of those heavy, blanketing storms that made a person grateful to have shelter, nurturing some deep instinct to curl up inside and wait for the rain to pass. Sitting together for an unhurried meal, reassured by the warm fire and pattering raindrops that all was safe. It was a simple pleasure, but the more she dwelled on it, the more Esther found a calm, reassuring satisfaction in the moment. At one point, Seina giggled faintly, to which Esther gave her a puzzled glance. Yeah, what's this about?
You were making a really cute, charming face just now.
Thank you.
Like a little cat after just finished a saucer of cream.
Esther hastily raised her mug and took a long sip of tea, taking refuge behind the painted ceramic.
Oh, I'm not teasing you. I know I make funny faces too. It just makes me happy to see you like that, since when you first arrived. You looked so hollow.
Hollow? Seina nodded, lowering her gaze to where she grasped her warm mug in both hands.
Yes, hollow. Like you didn't have anything left, I suppose.
From her suddenly reluctant, almost very reply, it almost seemed as if she was familiar with such a look. She could have been imagining things, but Esther thought she saw Seina shudder faintly, drawing closer to the fireplace.
Well, since we're both finished, I think I'll go wash up.
She hopped up to her feet, stacking their bowls together atop the tray.
Alright, I'll go upstairs and look for some books to bring down. Oh yes, yes, you can light the candles up there if you want, since it's so dark.
Is there a point in doing that for if she's bringing the books down?
I'll meet you back here in a bit then.
Yeah, lighting the candles down, up there, sounds dangerous now. With that, Seina swiveled to make her way towards the kitchen, her tray rattling softly. Her retreat seemed a little hazier than normal. Esther had the sense she was still bothered by something, perhaps the comment she'd made earlier about looking hollow. Despite her warm friendliness, Seina had a certain guarded side to her, a private shield and a degree of separation that Esther hadn't expected. It might fade eventually, if they grew to know each other better. Let me tell you, it's not easy. But right now, Esther felt like Seina was almost keeping her at arm's length, in a strange way. It's not easy to break through that wall. Unfortunately. After summoning the strength required to leave the warm, cozy fire, Esther forced herself out in the hallway and up the creaky stairs. But when she stepped in the study, just like before, Esther felt an oppressive, bleak atmosphere pressing down around her. In her haste to light the candles, she nearly tripped over her own 2 feet. Their glow didn't wholly alleviate the grim darkness, but was enough to bring Esther a little relief. Why did this room bother her so much? By all accounts, it seemed to look like a normal study, albeit a messy one. There was nothing that should have set her on the edge. Tch! Exhaling a long sigh, she inwardly mocked herself for her cowardice. She was here to find a cure, not to get caught up in her silly fear of shadows. Is she afraid of shadows? But the more she glanced around the small library, with its overflowing shelves and piles of scattered books and papers, the more daunting her task felt. The only real trail of research that Isaiah left were his scattered writings. Uncovering his studies would have been far easier if they were bound together, not written on individual scraps of parchment. However, if Isaiah went through phases of studying different subjects, perhaps the journal pages stuffed into similar books would be from roughly the same period of his life. With that hope in mind, Esther returned to the spot she'd found the previous journal entry, scouring intensely over the row of dusty tomes. It didn't take long for her to spot another piece of parchment, this one tucked inside a small letter book. Eagerly pulling it from the shelf, she let the tome fall open in her palms, revealing a short page scribbled in Isaiah's hand. What's this about now? She baffles me, that little girl. Always laughing, always cheerful. Always smiling and patient with me even after I raise my voice at her. I have only seen her cry once. It happened when I brought her outside this morning, preparing to bring her to the city's orphanage. As if she somehow knew our destination, the girl instantly began to bawl and scream, a dreadful sound I should hope never to hear again. So dreadful, in fact, that I could not stomach the thought of hearing it for hours, so I was forced to cancel my trip. I suppose I will keep her here, for now. When she gets older, she may be useful at cleaning and tending the land with me, at least. With any luck, she will have inherited my work ethic instead of her mother's. I mean, when it comes to taking care of the Manor, she's showing a tremendous work ethic. It's crazy. Isaiah had mentioned taking Seina to an orphanage in the last journal she'd read. The two entries must have been written very close together. Her hunch was right. The discovery made her heart leap with excitement, even though it was only a small revelation. But she should piece together Isaiah's path of study chronologically, as well as his inner thoughts. She might have a chance at figuring out his approach to a cure. A small note suddenly fluttered out from the back of the book, startling Esther. She bent down to grab it, her eyes drifting over a scribbled writing. Reminder. Finish reading and annotating the latest tome on spirits. Huh? Any relation to the Pale still seems unlikely. But if all my alchemical and biological studies have been fruitless, what have I to lose? She turned the book over to glance at its cover and spine, but there was no name to be seen. However, when she opened it to its first page, a large title stretched across the parchment in sharp letters. Talsmaveth. A treatise on spirits of shadow. Oh boy, I think I know why she's feeling that crazy, creepy atmosphere in that room now. This got a bit. Well, maybe he tried some summoning or something. Spirits of shadow. For some reason, as she murmured part of the title out to herself, Esther felt a faint chill crawling up her spine. It was only a book on superstition and unfounded claims, surely. But if Isaiah had singled it out, maybe it was still worth scanning through. Wasting not a minute further, she scooped up some of the surrounding books and loose papers on the shelf, cradling them carefully in her arms. But before she left, she had to quickly blow out all the candles. And once the gloomy darkness returned, it seemed even deeper than before.
Where is this going exactly?
Once she descended the stairs and returned to the warmly lit parlor, Esther exhaled a quiet sigh of relief. Seina was already waiting on the sofa, huddled up beneath a large, fluffy red blanket.
Hello, Esther! Welcome back! Oh, look at all those books here! I'll help you!
She sprang off the cushions eagerly, as if Esther's return was a welcome relief for her too. Together, they stacked up the books and papers at the one end of the sofa, forming a rather intimidating pile. Seina, however, didn't seem fazed in the slightest by the tower of texts, and bent down to examine the titles curiously.
Natural science, astronomy, alchemy. I don't think I've ever seen any of these before. Ah, wait! This book! I remember this one!
Seina reached for the same book Esther had picked up first. The book on spirits.
Yeah! Papa was always reading this book and scribbling notes. Asked him about it again and again, but he never told me why he was so obsessed with it. I guess he thought it would frighten me too much.
Interesting. So in the end, it all comes to the dark magic or something. With a soft sigh, she sank back down to the sofa, still holding the book with a certain reverence. When Esther settled in beside her, Seina reached out to drape the blanket around the other girl's shoulders.
Thank you. It is cozy. Isn't it? Reading is all better when you're wrapped in a blanket.
Yeah. And it makes it so easy to fall asleep.
Well then, let's see what Papa was fussing over so much. Are you ready?
No? Oh, but that's so freaking beautiful. Holding the book up so that Esther could see the pages, Seina began to read aloud, focusing on the pages her father had scribbled on the most. Before long, both of them were equally transfixed. In a strange blend of psychology, philosophy, and the supernatural, the author described how different spirits affected one's body and mind in different ways. The term spirits didn't refer solely to departed souls, but rather certain essences of the universe that manifested in concentrated forms. Some could be channeled for purposes like healing, luck, or creative inspiration, but most couldn't be controlled by humans. They would simply pass through the body of their own accord, or as dictated by other factors in the environment. However, as fascinating as it was considered, Esther listened with a skeptical detachment. With no proof beyond his own research and anecdotal evidence, the author's claims could hardly rival any real scientific study. And more importantly, Esther couldn't see any real relation to the Pale, at least, not in a way that would help her find a cure. Just as she was about to suggest they try a different book, Seina turned to a new chapter. It only lasted a single page, and the page after it was completely blank. A short warning on the study of the Arafel. When her eyes roamed across the title, a small shiver ran through her body, just like it had earlier.
Ah, such a short chapter. That's interesting, don't you think? This author likes using far too many words, so he really must have run out of ideas for this one.
After a small giggle to herself, Seina cleared her throat before starting to read once more.
For the realm of spirits is infinitely diverse. All those noted thus far have one thing in common. Their energy is ephemeral, and they will rarely affect a body for extended periods. However, there is one type of spirit that will not only invade, but overtake a human soul whenever they are given the chance. They are known as the Arafel, shades that lie completely beyond the realm of mortal understanding. I shall not write the detail of them here.
What if said Arafel is in the study? Oh boy.
I shall not write in detail of them here, for it is said that dwelling on the Arafel will often draw them to one's presence, and thus few have dared to document them. Once their attention is garnered, they will lure in their unsuspecting target without remorse, or more precisely, the target will be drawn to them inescapably, without realizing or understanding their own actions. My sole warning, then, is to avoid any study or investigation of these spirits. Do not trifle with the darker workings of nature, no matter how alluring their call may be. Some aspects of the ancient world are meant to remain untouched.
That's why I'm not getting there. After she finished reading, the parlor grew chillingly silent. For a moment, it felt as if the fire's warmth had vanished. And the only thing staving off the cold air was Seina's small form huddling against Esther. Neither of them immediately spoke. Both their gazes were still drawn to the single page, lying open beside its empty bone-white twin. Unlike most of the other chapters, where Isaiah had lined the margins with his scribbled comments, this chapter was completely void of any such notes. The only mark he'd left was a dark, bold outline beneath the first mention of Arafel. The thick ink blot beside it suggested his pen had lingered there for a time. Either he'd been deliberating about writing more, or else he had simply gotten lost in thought.
The Arafel. It's a pretty name, but the way he described them, it's really eerie.
Seina finally broke the silence, her hesitant voice barely above a whisper.
What do you suppose it means, Esther? Could they have something to do with the Pale?
She offered no reply for a long moment. A murky, uncertain feeling shifted briefly at the back of her mind, before she pushed it away, annoyed at her own bothersome insecurities.
I don't believe in whatever he's talking about. Even if spirits like that existed, there is no reason why it'd be related to the Pale. It's a disease of the body. You ease the symptoms with a tonic, not with a priest warding of spirits.
The more she voiced her thoughts aloud, the more firmly Esther believed them. The lure of superstition had only tempted her in moments of weakness, in her impatience to find a cure.
But I'll still keep looking for Isaiah's notes on them. His research on spirits might have led him somewhere else important. You're right. Maybe Papa found another lead. Something more, sturdy.
It was easy to see the doubt on her face. Did Seina really believe in such things? She was younger, of course, but still far more intelligent and mature than most girls Esther knew. It wasn't simply a case of a naive child being afraid of ghosts. Why then? Why she give any credence to such far-fetched writings? Why then would she give any credence? Okay, I read this. Oh boy. I always do this blunder when the text doesn't arrive freshly in the box, but is continuation of the text that already is in the box, right? Anyway, Esther just couldn't understand it.
Let's look through something else. Yeah, let's.
In the brief moment of awkwardness that followed, Seina cleared her throat a little nervously, before pausing with a shy, slightly embarrassed smile.
Does she know something? Could I ask you a favor, Esther? I'd really like to read one of Papa's journal pages, but... well, like I said yesterday, he always told me not to.
She twirled a few strands of hair around one finger, letting out a rueful laugh.
There is a reason for that. There were lots of things he was ashamed he'd written. He said, but he didn't want to throw them away. He needed to remember what he'd written and thought about, so that he'd never make the same mistakes again. I know which journals are ones he wouldn't want me reading, but maybe you could look one over quickly and see.
Of course. After briefly hesitating, Esther nodded. She was happy to do anything to repay Seina's many kindnesses, but after reading Isaiah's past journal entries, they seemed like they might be more painful for Seina than anything. I mean, definitely, from what we've learned so far, but maybe afterwards it all changed, right? Hopefully. Picking up a few bound pieces of parchment from the pile, Esther quickly scanned over the pages, searching for any mention of Seina that might upset the other girl if she read it. Fortunately for, the entry she picked up seemed unrelated to family matters. It looked more like a hastily, angrily scribbled rant, with penmanship even messier than Isaiah's normal writings.
This one. Shall I read it for us? Oh, yes, please.
Resting her chin on Esther's shoulder, she peered curiously at the frenzied scribbling. With a deep inhale, Esther slowly began to read Isaiah's words aloud. Earlier today. Should I be... okay.
Earlier today, I was reflecting upon my departure from the Academy's medical circle. At the time, it was such a difficult decision, such an agonizing farewell. Now, however, I look back upon those times with awe, wondering how on earth I ever survived in such a place. I was constantly delegating research and experiments to different departments, and yet nearly every completed task would always return to me with some issue. The use of faulty tools or sloppy documentation, contaminated materials, careless omission of important details. It exasperated me to no end. Even the purported finest of researchers with the most spotless of records always seemed to deliver a perfunctory performance. Whenever I would bring my unsatisfying results before the head, he acted as if he didn't care in the slightest. On occasion, he'd echo my complaints with sympathetic tooting and a shake of his head, but in the end, I gathered he simply had no investment in the results. Much of the time, they had went so far as to defend their mistakes, only stopping at the edge of calling me an outright fool for caring as much as I did. Any problems I encountered were mine to resolve. Every should be solely mine to bear. Frustration brought me to the edge of breaking, down over and over again, and only my damn refusal to concede would pull me back from the brink. Hey. And certainly, perhaps I'm far too finical and needlessly worried over fine details. Despite my vanity, I realize I can be hopelessly stubborn at times. But it is such a crime to strive for the best performance one can achieve. To care so passionately for beautiful results, a delicate procedure, a loving attention to detail. Can I rightly be called mad for my longing to make my envisioned perfection into a reality? Or, if not perfection, then its very closest sibling, a masterpiece of planning. No, I see now with lucid eyes, living that hive of mediocrity was truly a blessing in disguise. Whatever I can accomplish alone will no doubt be far smaller in scale than anything I could have done at the academy. This I realize. But in the end, to be truly pleased with one's work, it must be solely a product of one's own design. And somehow, it brings me an odd, unexpected comfort in these long days of solitary research and study, knowing I shall have no one to blame but myself when I am dissatisfied.
To Esther's surprise, as soon as she finished reading, Seina broke out into warm, delighted laughter.
That, it just sounds so much like Papa, the little rants he would always go about over dinner. He always took himself and his work really impossibly seriously, never any slacking, always beating himself up over his mistakes. It brings back so many memories.
Slowly, the bright affectionate smile on her face began to wane. She seemed to be struggling to keep herself cheery in the face of whatever she'd remembered. But it appeared to be a losing battle.
Seina, your father...
Hesitating, Esther bit her lip.
You don't have to answer, but... could I ask what happened to him?
The music changed.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. No, it's fine.
Seina reached out, placing her small hand on Esther's arm reassuringly. In a way, the faint smile she wore seemed almost grateful, as was something she'd want to talk about, but hadn't been able to bring up. He's not in the cemetery. He's not in one of the bedrooms, right? I'm so worried. I know, this just kinda jumped into my mind.
At first, I didn't realize he was gone. That morning, I woke up and started the day like usual, making a meal for both of us. I put Papa's on a little tray and brought it upstairs, planning to leave it outside the door, tell him I loved him, and then go start my chores. But...
an involuntary shudder went through her, briefly interrupting her halting, quiet words.
when I reached his study, I saw the door was open. For a moment, I was so happy. I thought he was finally recovering and could come play with me and work outside again. But he wasn't in his study, or anywhere in the Manor, or outside in the garden.
Huh?
It's like he just vanished into thin air.
Oh boy.
When I realized Papa had disappeared, I was so scared.
What if he found out something about those, whatever they were called?
For 3 days, all I did was search for him, everywhere I could. I didn't return to the Manor at all. I only ate some berries and roots, drank from the stream, and slept on leaf beds. But I never found anything, not a single trace.
As she spoke in an ever fainter trembling voice, her fingers curled tightly in the fabric of Esther's sleeve. It was evident, from her slightly choked words, that she was holding back tears as much as possible.
It's okay to cry. Finally, I came back home. I didn't know what to do. It seemed like the end of everything. I thought I would die of starvation, or sickness, or from being all alone for the rest of my life. I didn't even have any tears left to cry. I just stared at Papa's door for hours and hours, wondering if I'd wake up from a bad dream. The only time I moved was when I heard a rustle from outside, hoping and praying it was him, but it never was. When night came, I couldn't sleep. I hid under my blankets, and I listened to the floorboards creaking, over and over.
She swallowed. For a long few moments, Seina went silent, but it was clear she wasn't finished, so Esther remained quiet.
Then one night, I was so exhausted I couldn't stay awake anymore. I fell asleep, a deep sleep, the kind where it feels like you only just blinked your eyes. And when I woke up, the sun was shining so brightly through my window. I can't explain it, but I felt like it was telling me to keep on living. To keep Papa's memory alive by protecting all his hard work, the manor, the gardens, the cemetery. He did so much to make us happy here. And on his desk, when I was cleaning it, I found everything he'd left for me. Special almanacs, maps, guidelines, and some gold coins in case of emergency. It really made me believe he wanted me to go on without him. He didn't want me to give up. So I didn't.
She finished with a numb, almost featureless expression. Instead, in contrast to the optimistic nature of her words, if she still didn't fully believe them. What a hard life. Crazy. At first, Esther couldn't think of any possible reply. So she just gingerly curled her arm around Seina, giving her a small, comforting hug against her side. In response, the blonde girl rested her head on Esther's shoulder. She took a few shuddering breaths, squeezing her eyes shut for several moments, and then reopening them with a long exhale.
Seina.
Her voice met with a steady crackling of the fire, as low and gentle as possible. The question on the tip of her tongue. She didn't want to distress Seina further, but the story seemed so incomplete. She couldn't help it. She had no choice but to ask.
Are you certain that your father has really passed on? Couldn't it be that he just went back to the city?
Seina stared with heavy-lidded eyes at the grey window pane, where the distant stormy sky still showed no sign of clearing. A long silence passed between them, but just as Esther began to wonder if Seina had heard her question.
Before he disappeared, Papa was... He was sick. I don't think he wanted to be alive anymore, even if he was afraid of death. I don't know how, but I just knew. I knew he was gone, so I stopped looking for him anymore. When I accepted it, I grieved for him for a long, long time. Until I could finally move on.
With Seina's cheek on her shoulder, Esther could feel the warmth of small droplets falling against her blouse. Silently, she held the small girl close, listening to her breathing as it slowly grew less uneven. She couldn't say anything that would truly express the sorrow she felt for Seina. No platitudes or even words of comfort would do it any justice. There were some things that could only be shown through the warmth of a lasting hug. A reminder that someone else was there, understanding how much it hurt, even if they couldn't fully comprehend the way it felt. But in the end, it still never seemed like enough. Finally, after what felt like a very long while, Seina slowly straightened up.
I'm sorry, Esther. We're supposed to be going through Papa's books and notes, weren't we?
She gave a small, sheepish laugh, brushing some of her hair behind one ear.
But thank you for listening. I mean, it really helps. You don't have to thank me.
When Esther shook her head somberly, Seina's smile actually brightened a little. The sadness in her eyes was still apparent, but it also seemed slightly less heavy than before in a way.
Well, I'm going to thank you anyway. I suppose a better thanks would be going over more of the research together, wouldn't it? There is still a lot left in the piles. Only if you feel well enough to do so. I do. Let's go through this first, shall we?
Picking up another stack of parchment, Seina laid the pages out on her lap, shuffling some of them over to Esther. At first, it felt a little awkward to start up working again after their talk, but the rustling of papers and rhythm of their murmured reading helped restore a comforting atmosphere. To their disappointment, however, they soon realized that none of the other papers were Isaiah's journals. Instead, they seemed to be his esoteric, incomprehensible notes taken from various books, scientific theories mixed in with long ramblings on the supernatural. At one point, the fire's warmth combined with the coziness of their slow-paced quiet reading started lulling both girls to sleep. Well, yeah. Without even realizing it, they ended up slumping towards the ends of the sofa, dozing off peacefully. That was me in high school. Oh, let's study. I have those notes. I have those books. Let's study. I would lie on the couch or on the bed and start reading, and 5 minutes later, asleep. Yeah. When they awoke an hour or so later, they were equally hungry. Lunch had been forgotten in the midst of their engrossed work. But Esther was more than happy to help Seina in the kitchen, and together they cooked up a well-deserved meal of savory porridge with roasted vegetables. The two girls ate together mostly in contemplative silence, their thoughts preoccupied by Isaiah's books and writings. Delving into his journal had left a heavy, uncertain wave in the air, alongside the guilt and morbid fascination of uncovering dead secrets. Esther had no idea if Isaiah would have wanted his writings to be examined by a stranger, one who was mainly searching in her own self-interests at that. But Seina surely knew him better than anyone else, and she seemed just as eager as Esther to explore what her father left behind. It appeased a little bit of Esther's guilt, although she still had the sense of treading somewhere private, intruding on intimate thoughts that were only written down in an attempt to lighten their burden. After their meal, they returned to comb through more of Isaiah's research. But again, they met with little success. There was one thing of interest, however. In some of the books and scattered notes on spirits, Esther noticed an unsettling trend. Torn papers and large blacked out lines. It almost seemed like Isaiah had hunted down specific passages and attempted to erase them, but in a rotting, frenzied manner that went beyond even his normal messiness. In an eerie coincidence, she couldn't find any other mention of the Arafel. Okay. This the disappearance has to got to do with that. And basically, I believe he was basically like, even if I won't survive, even if I told her she shouldn't be looking through my notes and so on, she might still do that, right, eventually. You know, I mean, she would be alone anyway, and that would be something that she would do to kill time somehow, right? And basically that way he was kind of erasing the trace of that, I would say. Anyway, there's got to be something. There will be something ghosty. Perhaps it just happened to be missing from the books she'd brought down. Though an ominous sense in her gut made her wonder if that was really the case. Something strange had happened here, and the more Esther pondered it, the more she burned with desire to explore Isaiah's unraveled mind. I think I might be correct about that.
I'm sorry, Esther, but I don't think I can read another word tonight.
Surrendering to a long, exhausted yawn, Seina stretched her arms out over her head.
I don't think I can either. It's not exactly light reading. You can say that again. My brain feels like it's jumbled up from all that fancy writing. They'll use 100 times more words than they have to, don't they? Maybe that makes them feel smart.
Definitely.
Well, it makes me feel bored. They'll need to think about their audience more.
She put on a playful pout, dangling her legs over the side of the couch. With a soft toot, her foot absent-mindedly hit the side of Esther's satchel, which was still resting on the floor.
Oh, sorry, I knocked it over. Here, let me pick this up.
Oh, you don't have
to. It's fine, really.
But Seina was already on her knees, scooping out the small trinkets and notes that had fallen from the pack.
Is this your watch, Esther? It's very pretty.
Picking up the silver timepiece from the ground, Seina turned it over in her hand, studying it with curiously shining eyes. All of a sudden, Esther found herself deeply uncomfortable.
It's not a normal watch. It holds my medicine. The watch part is only for tracking time between doses. Doses? What do you...
Reaching down, Esther picked up the silver timepiece from Seina's outstretched palm. Then, with her thumb atop one of the buttons, she pushed until the metal relented with a short, sharp click. Seina's eyes widened when the watch's back popped open, revealing the cruelly glittering needle hidden inside. The sight of it seemed to both repel and fascinate her, but most of all concerned welled in her gaze as she glanced up to Esther.
You inject yourself with that?
Yes.
Yes, every night. happens if you don't? My muscles will slowly grow numb and then give out altogether. At that point, I'll still be conscious, but it's only a matter of time before I will be comatose. It's possible to survive the paralysis for a short time, but if I don't quickly get another dose, my heart will stop. All the injection does is hold the threat at bay. It will always be there, no matter what. The fatigue of the pain is not really tiredness. It's a growing catatonia kept frozen in its earliest stage, before you lose the ability to move.
She could hear her own calm, detached voice echo in her ears, describing the effects the same clinical way she had so many times before.
That's so terrible. I'm so sorry, Esther.
After a moment, Esther gave her a small shrug. To her, it was largely just another part of existence, a bodily need she had to deal with, like eating or sleeping. Of course, she longed to be rid of it, but after dealing with the Pale for so long, she could barely remember what life felt like without its wave.
We're going to find it. A cure for the Pale. A way to set you free.
Huh?
I promise I'll help you, Esther. I'll do anything I can. I mean it. We'll find a cure some way or another. I know we will.
As grateful as she was to hear Seina's firm, determined words, her inner doubts refused to lift. It was too easy to believe in empty reassurances. Oftentimes, they only made the later disappointment far worse than before. But she would never voice such thoughts to Seina.
Thank you.
Judging from how the smaller girl's features grew slightly crestfallen, Esther hadn't hidden her lack of faith as well as she'd thought. After a long moment thought, Seina composed herself again.
Well, we've done quite a lot today for being stuck inside, haven't we? Even though we napped, I'm still so tired. You should sleep then. I'm tired too. You're probably right. I don't think I'd be of any more use reading those books tonight. At least the rain stopped. It should be a lovely fresh day tomorrow. I hope so anyway.
Seina combed her fingers through her messy hair, letting out a sigh.
Huh.
Briefly, her gaze shifted over towards the watch still in Esther's hand. A flicker of worry and something almost like frustration reflected in her eyes. I wonder if her father also used that.
I hope you can rest well, Esther. I'll see you in the morning, alright?
Esther nodded. Her fingers folded over the cold metal in her palm, masking it somewhat self-consciously.
Thank you for the help again. Good night. No need to thank me. It was fun reading together, really. Well then, good night.
With a gentle wave, she turned to make her way back upstairs, like always. When she was gone, Esther pulled out her nightshirt and began to change, savoring the loose and cozy warmth her new makeshift pajamas offered. She'd already settled into a comfortable bedtime routine, and part of her enjoyed pulling out her heavy blankets each night, making a pleasant nest for herself. But somehow, when she finally sat back down and clicked open her watch, it seemed all the more difficult to bring its syringe to her arm. It wasn't as if she had a choice. The needle sunk in, just like always. Bring a moment of relief before a wave of nausea crashed down onto her and washed away any sense of comfort. Pulling it back with a shudder, she closed the watch as quickly as possible. Then all but diving beneath her blankets, Esther curled herself tightly into a ball. We'll find a cure. Some way. Or another. I know we will. If only it were easier to believe those strong, heartfelt words. If only she truly believed a cure existed at all. Oh, achievement unlocked, Guardian. I think that's the second achievement. Slowly getting there. Anyway. Let's end the episode. Or you know what? No. Or yes. Should we start the next episode with this? Let's end the episode. I mean, it's over an hour already. And I actually want to get some sleep. I'm glad that our lovely traveler right now, Esther, decided to actually explain that the watch is not actually actual watch, but what exactly the device is for, to Seina here. I think it was nice that she wasn't hiding that, and so on. Anyway, I wonder if Seina will find out actually about what her father was exactly noting in the previous, let's say, diaries and so on. That would be probably very heart-shattering for her. And so on. But anyway, for now, let's end here. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a wonderful day. And I see you tomorrow in the next episode. Bye bye.